What is up, guys? Today we are back on the Honda CRF250L. It's been almost 2 years since I bought this bike, and you can see I haven't rode it a ton. It only has 2,591 miles on it as we speak, and we are starting this video the same way as the first review video I did on it. We're gonna go fill up some growlers. So I figure what's worth talking about here is, after 2 years of owning it, do I plan on keeping it or getting something new? And has this bike lived up to my expectations of ownership? In that first review video, we talked about being on the freeway. You get used to the fishtail it does. It's, you know, it's not like you're on good tires. You're on freaking dirt tires on the freeway going freaking 80. So it's not amazing by any means. I think I probably got her to like 80-ish. And I talked about how squirmy it is around on the road as you're riding, which is all obviously still very true. And you could really bank the squirminess of this bike is really on the tires. It's not really the bike's fault. Because if you cared enough to put some supermoto tires on this thing, she would run pretty good. Finally got 65 miles an hour. Jesus, come on, baby. Here on now. So my biggest complaint is I wanted to be able to ride this thing to and from work, and sadly for me, I got moved to a different job spot, so my freeway time doubled. And on top of that, technically, my previous job, I had all back roads I could take to get to it, and I only had to hit the freeway for a mile. So it made the bike a little more bearable, because this is by no means a commuting motorcycle. Yeah, it gets really good fuel mileage. No, it doesn't have enough fuel to go very far. So commuting is definitely, it's pretty much off the table for me with this motorcycle. I mean, if you were to put maybe supermoto tires on it, some hand guards, and maybe a visor of some sort, you know, maybe it would ride a little bit better. But let's face it, that's not the point. I mean, for already spending $5,000, we could spend $1,000 or $2,000 more, and we could buy like a CB500, the commuter version motorcycle, the wannabe adventure. We could do something like that if we really cared more about freeway versus off-road. And I would say that I'm kind of that guy. I am definitely more freeway than off-road, because my son's gotten older now. He's now riding his R3. He doesn't care to go ride dirt bikes, and the reality is I want motorcycles that are better on the freeway than they are at dirt. And this thing is perfect right in the middle, because you can do both. The only issue is it does neither very good. So really, it's almost like you have to choose with this motorcycle. Do you want to make it a better dirt bike, or do you want to make it a better street bike? So I think at some point of ownership, you get to that decision point where you go one way or the other. And there's no real point in, like, say, buying a commuter motorcycle and then keeping this for your dirt bike, because let's face it, it's not a great dirt bike. You'd almost be better off buying that commuter motorcycle and then buying a real dirt bike. But I know that poses a lot of other issues too. Like, that's great, you got a dirt bike, but you can't get it to where you want to go ride. So, you know, this still plays in that huge factor of, like, I can get on this thing and I can ride it to off-road and I can go play for a while. I don't have to have a truck and trailer to utilize this motorcycle, which is why I didn't want just another dirt bike. I wanted to be able to go play, and I did go play with this thing. It was actually a lot of fun. I did quite a bit of off-road riding up in Pozo, which is always a blast. It's definitely a little dangerous because you're in the middle of nowhere. There's little to no people out there. The cell phones don't work out there. So, like, when I'd roll out there by myself, it was kind of like, maybe this is not a good idea. So, and that's a whole nother aspect of this motorcycle. Like, I thought my brother-in-law was going to buy one of these, so if he did, we could meet halfway for a little bit better safety measures, but he went a totally different way. But really, like, the point of the video is just kind of like lay out the basics of this motorcycle to you guys, what it's like owning it after 2 years. And I've got a lot of negatives is what I've got for the motorcycle, which is super annoying. There is not a lot of positives in here for me. We could start with suspension. Like, I know I talked about that on my other video, which was, you know, if you really cared enough, you could put, you know, some forked inserts into this thing, better springs or whatever, and do what it would take to kind of make her a little bit better off-road. I'm kind of like not interested in spending more money on it, to be honest with you. Speaking of fueling stations, I don't get very far from one, that's for sure. There's another thing I don't really enjoy about the bike is it like 2.1 gallons? That's, yeah. So another big negative of it would be this rear tire, which is, I mean, we're sitting at what, just about 2,600 miles, and it's already pretty damn wore out. It pretty much needs a new one. So I mean, there's another thing to factor in there. Like, are you going to go with harder tires that maybe last a little bit longer on the road but get you even worse in the dirt? Or are you going to stick with these dirts and go through tires every 2,500? So, I mean, that's worse than a Super Sport. I'll get at least 3,500 to 4,000 out of one of my Super Sport motorcycles if I'm only getting 25, maybe 3,000 out of a dirt bike tire here, which, I mean, that's fair. It is a little bit harder tire than a dirt bike, and it's pretty decent off-road, at least from the experiences I've had with it. Another thing to factor into this bike, you're gonna go through them tires pretty quick, or you ultimately make that decision, do I turn this into a street motorcycle, put some nice tires on it, put some better, tighter suspension, and make it, you know, actually run nice on the road, and then obviously at the expense of losing your off-road enjoyment of it. And I think the big thing to notice is, like, I've had it for 2 years and I got 2,600 miles on it. That's 1,300 miles a year. That's friggin' nothing. I mean, I've got more miles on my Honda Grom, and I live out in the middle of nowhere, so most of the roads are like 55, so you're running that Grom at its highest freaking range everywhere you go, and I still have more miles on that thing than this bike. So I don't know, guys. Well, that should tell you something. I mean, it's not, you know, fair with the assessment that I've doubled my distance to work. So, like, riding it to work is not as realistic for me anymore, because let's face it, 40 miles on the freeway going 80 with this thing would be absolutely terrible. A terrible experience, especially early in the morning when you're cold as crap. So I don't think that would be cool. I think it was acceptable to ride this motorcycle 10-ish miles max on the freeway. If your commute needed that, I think it would be acceptable. And since all I've done is bash the little thing to try and talk about some things I do like about the motorcycle, if you're not commuting, the 250 is perfectly fine. It has enough power. It's acceptable off-road. The power is fine, in my opinion. There's no, like, crazy need to have an obscene more. It's adequate, especially for, like, regular street riding and some mild off-road adventures. I think it's perfectly fine. The newer version, which is the 300, it's not a 300, by the way. It's not that much faster at all than this bike. There's a few little decent improvements on it, but is it going to be better than the CRF250L? Yeah, very minute. It's the same freaking bike, guys. In my opinion, it's not that much better. If you already had this, there'd be zero reason to sell this just to go buy the 300. If you didn't have one and you were still, like, dead set, I want a 250L or the small CC'd Honda bike for the street, yeah, sure, buy the 300 over this. They're the same price, obviously. Better deal, for sure. But it is definitely not upgrade worthy, I guess is where I'm trying to say. So back to what I like about it. The other thing, the most important thing, in my opinion, about this motorcycle is sheer reliability. Honda is definitely the best when it comes to a reliable motorcycle. I will say Honda's never the most fun motorcycle you can buy, but it is definitely the most reliable, solid piece of equipment. Hondas are freaking badass, in my opinion. But for the minute upgrades I did to the bike, the handlebar, I love them. I love these freaking woods high. These have been great. Obviously the TST fender eliminator with the integrated turn signals, yep. TST just does it right, man. Great component. Okay, huge benefit. Look at how bad this road is. Barely even notice it. There are a few acceptable times for this crappy suspension. This definitely being one of them. My R7 or Aprilia would just be freaking slamming on this thing.
Now, I know this has all been mainly a negative video, but in reality, I just don't go off-road as much as I thought I would, and sadly, I have to spend way more time on the freeway commuting than I want to. But I've really been leaning towards an adventure bike that would be a good commuter, but also handle just a tiny bit of off-road. I know it would be much less than what this 250L could do, but I would be okay with just being able to go off-road and handle some light trails. But let me know if you guys are interested in adventure bikes and which one you think would be the best option. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you next week. Peace.